Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Rockaway Fridays with the Wave. I'm your host, Mark Healy, the editor-in-chief of the Wave newspaper, which is Rockaway's newspaper since 1893. And I'm just so privileged and pleased to have with us someone who is well known to folks in Rockaway for 25 years. He was the front man for Black 47, that great Irish rock group. He's still a musician, of course, but he's also a playwright, and he's also a host on SiriusXM's Celtic Crush. But he's here today because we want to talk about his brand new book. His brand new book is called Rockaway Blue. And I'm telling you, I loved it. I loved it, Larry. Welcome to the show.
It's my pleasure, Mark. It's always good to be around Rockaway people. I spend a lot of time around them.
Well, that becomes very clear when you read the book. You know, as I wrote about in today's paper, and as I will continually tell people when they ask me, I don't always review books. You know, I don't. And when I spoke to your editor, he had asked me for a review, and I said, well, I got to be honest, I don't review many books because I don't like to do a bad review. I only like to, I really don't, because, as a former actor and somebody who's written a book himself, I love feedback. If somebody has bad feedback about my book, that's one thing, but I want people to succeed. So when I read this book, I was a little concerned. I was like, oh, what if I don't like it? But I loved it. And, so congratulations, because one of the things I really loved about it, Larry, was its authenticity, which I felt was really shown through the entire book.
That's great. Yeah. Well, I've been going to Rockaway a long, long time. As many people know, I came from Ireland in the 70s, and I moved into the East Village, and, no one had any money. There was no air conditioning, nothing like that. And so I was in an after hours one morning, and I was saying, man, I got to go home now, and it's going to be so hot. I probably won't be able to sleep. And he said, the best thing you do is get on the A train, but don't go to the Bronx, because I know you go up there, but go the other way, the other direction. And there's a great beach out there, and there's a whole great scene out in Rockaway, and you should go out. So the next week or whatever, I went out on a Sunday, and he was right. I was wondering, is this ride on the subway ever going to end? Is he having me on? Maybe, sending me in a circle around to the Bronx or something. But finally, I came on Rockaway, and the first thing, I don't know what street it would have been, but it was a kind of a main drag, and with a lot of Irish bars on it. And everybody's standing outside, all these old Irish guys with the red faces on, and there's fiddles and accordions playing in the background. And I thought, man, this is great. And I don't think I saw the beach that day. I just went into one of the bars, stayed there till 11 at night. And then the people were kind of a bit worried, were saying, well, how are you getting home to these fellas? Taking the A, and it's taking the A at 11 o'clock at night. I said, can you think of another way of doing it? And that was it. And then I eventually came back and found the beach and all that. And, I've been going to Rockaway ever since.
I want to rewind just a little bit, because during this whole process, being introduced to you, and or at least what I thought was being introduced to you, I went back, and as I do with everything I write, I did my research. And I discovered an interview I had done with you back in 2014. I had only been at the Wave for a couple of weeks. Maybe that's why I don't remember it, but it was when Black 47 played its last Rockaway gig at the Rockaway Irish Festival. I somehow was able to get an interview with you, and we talked about, Black 47 and the 25 years that you guys have been around. And, I had seen you guys at Connolly's in the city a couple of times. And of course I saw you at the Irish Festival. So I was aware of the band, but then I got to know you a little bit. And my God, I could not remember that we had that interview. I remember writing about Black 47, but so as I'm reading the interview, I reached out to you and I said, man, I found this old interview that we did. And you said, yeah, I mentioned the book in it too. So tell me about that a little bit.
Yeah, well, the book has been kind of brewing since 9/11. But I'd written other books in between it. It was always an idea I had, like that the story of the real people who went through 9/11 and had to deal with it somewhere or another was never really told. You know, it was always told by academics or, you know, people dealing with Giuliani or something like that. And I felt that people were being left behind. You know, this is a huge thing that happened to the city. And because I was in Black 47 and we were known as the house band of New York City, I just knew so many people from all over. And of course, I knew a lot of people from Rockaway. And I decided if I'd ever write a book to do with 9/11, I would situate it in Rockaway, because it was always, to me, a place unto itself. In Black 47, we called it the Republic of Rockaway, because people did their own thing out there. It was like a separate, it was part of the city,
Still
but
do, Larry.
it wasn't part of the city. There were different laws out there.
Right.
And so I set the book 3 years after the event, because I didn't want to deal with so much with the actual event, because that was so cataclysmic and everyone dealt with that in some way. So dealt with a family in Rockaway Beach and in Breezy. There's the father, Detective Sergeant Jimmy Murphy, his wife Maggie, who's a teacher, the English teacher at Stella Maris, and the eldest son Brian, who's kind of one of those guys who's really getting on in life, who's moved to a great place up in Breezy or down in Breezy, whichever way you look at it. And then there's the other son, Kevin, who's not moving so well in life. And Brian, who has become a lieutenant, has moved up past his father, gets killed during 9/11. And he's a hero because he runs back in. And a couple of years later, the family is beginning to come to terms with the loss of Brian. He was the center of the family. And they're beginning to come to terms with when the father, Jimmy, finds out that Brian was actually in the North Tower 30 minutes before the plane struck. And being a detective, it's like, oh my God, what was he doing there? But at the same time, he's of two minds whether he should investigate this, because his wife Maggie is finally, you know, just coming to terms with this. And Brian had been one of those guys who cut corners in life. He was mysterious, kind of a guy who always got on. Everyone loved him, but there were certain things about his lifestyle that didn't sit well with his father. And he was thinking, you know, I love Brian, but if I really look into this, am I going to find out some things that I don't want to know, but especially that Maggie and Brian's wife, Rose, down on her own in the big house in Breezy, are, you know, not going to be able to deal with. So it's a conflicted search.
Yeah, and I really, there was so many things that resonated for me as I read it. You know, I lost two friends who were firemen. You know, everybody knows someone, you know, that died that day. You know, family members, friends, and so, you know, you capture that. You know, I honestly, I think it was perfect that you said it 3 years after. Because I think there are people even today that still feel the same. You know, the impact is still the same. Yeah. But you know, the fact that it's 3 years, I think for people who don't get it, when they read it, they're going to be like, "Wow, people were still this upset 3 years later." I mean, yeah, because there's still so many questions that have been unanswered about that day. But setting it in Rockaway, I think, was really important. But there was a risk, I think. And we talked about it a little via email. There's a risk when you set something in Rockaway, because if you get one thing wrong, as we witnessed this week with Andrew Yang, who's the candidate for mayor, He gave an answer in our paper last week for about Rockaway. He called it the Far Rockaway Beaches, and he's been getting killed on social media all week. So, you know, the fact that, you know, you said it in Rockaway was a real risk for someone who doesn't live here. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I was really well aware of the risk. Fortunately, my brother lives on Reed Avenue, Jimmy Kirwan. He's kind of a character up there in Breezy. And so I used to meet him, this is pre-pandemic, in Rogers. Jimmy goes to get his groceries on a Tuesday afternoon. So I always knew he was going to be in Rogers at a certain time. So I would hop on the A, or I would take the ferry out and meet him there. And I'd have a list of questions. And, you know, there's a great crowd of drinkers in there on a Tuesday afternoon. And so I would be asking these questions, and I wanted to establish, you know, I got everything right. And, you know, there would be arguments. No, it wasn't that. I'm thinking, Jesus Christ, you guys all live here, man. You know, you should know these things. And I didn't write it down then either a lot of the time, because it kind of intimidated people when I started to write. So I'd have to remember it and get on the A train like I did in the 70s with a full head of beer in me and write it down when I got home.
Right.
So there was one question though I kept asking and asking. I even called the library about it. You know, the library that's on the main drag on Rockaway Beach, I can't think of it now, but where was that?
Yeah, the Peninsula one, the Peninsula branch. You're talking about that one, or the one up like 116?
The one up
on 94th. It's like 94th and 95th, right off the boardwalk.
No, the one further up.
Yeah. So okay, so that's in 116. Yeah.
Where was that beforehand? The one that's kind of the modern-looking building. I don't have my notes in front of me now anymore.
You know, that's a good question. You know, I'm gonna have to ask my all my Rockaway people that one.
Nobody could give me that answer. So in the end, it was still the one outstanding question I had. And as I was handing it in, I said, I am not taking chances with the Rockaway people. And I changed the consensus where people thought it was. And I said, they took a walk down the street instead of took a walk down the street.
That's what it does. That's what it does. You're just so afraid to make a mistake. I am now afraid that I said I didn't know where the other library was. I'm going to hear about it in the comments but you know, it's funny. We had a laugh about that because and that fear of not being accurate, right? When I saw you kept referring to the inn. And, you know, the only inn I know is RBI, which is the Rockaway Beach Inn, which I used to call the places where dreams go to die. So I didn't think it was that place because that's in the 90s. And I get in trouble for that too, but that's okay. I get in trouble a lot. I'm always in the doghouse. But you kept talking about a place called the Inn. So I made it a point. I said, you know, Larry, I'm sure you know better than me, but where is this inn that you keep talking about?
Well, I mentioned the places I was really familiar with, especially like Connolly's and the Circle, and because Black 47 had played there. And of course I was up at the Blarney and places with my brother and Kennedy's, but I wanted one place that I could talk about the city, the barman and the people who were in there and be specific about them. And I had written a book before called Rock on the Bronx, and you know, the Bronx is full of bars, and I happen to name a couple of them in this book. And there was a lot of, in the book, there was various things like drug dealing and whatever going on. And, you know, not many people, because everyone's pretty broad-minded in the Bronx, but a few people took exception to it. Not in a big way, but I realized, you know, I'm encroaching on someone's privacy when you do that. So I wanted a fictional place, and another place that I used to hang out a lot in was the Inn in Long Beach, owned by a friend of mine, Pete.
Yep.
So it just seemed, when I said the inn, it just seemed like Rockaway
Right.
Long, that kind of
Well, that's
thing.
what I thought you were talking about. I was like, wait a minute, when did they go to Long Beach? That's what I says. I'm like, I'm like, am I missing something? Let me read that chapter again. So that was a good laugh. That was a good laugh that we had. But I think that it resonates also on another level. And I don't know if you're familiar with the work of John Lesquat, but he writes about his first book about Dismas Hardy, who is a retired cop, becomes a bartender, and it's a continuing series of novels. The first one being Dead Irish. I don't know if you're aware of that book, but
No.
that's when I first started reading your book, and it's a high compliment because it's like one of my favorite books of all time. It's probably in my top 10, Dead Irish. And, it had that same feeling of the disconnect, between father and son, the disconnect that some families have. Even though there's great love there is a disconnect. And there's always these walls that come up when you're communicating through grief, through any kind of, family kind of conflict. It's almost like, people say it's just an Irish thing. I think it's an everything. I think it's an all family thing. And there was like conflicts with the father and the son that resonated with me. I'm always looking for the best ways to communicate with my children. So, there was a lot of that stuff there, not just specific to Rockaway, specific to 9/11. And I think that's why I could not put it down. I mean, I picked this book up and didn't put it down again until I finished it. I mean, it was that evocative. And I think that as you're writing it, was there a lot of, like, where did you get your, like, was there a lot of personal stuff in here? Was there, stuff based on interviews that you had done? Where did you get like a lot of the source material for this?
No, I tend it with plays and with books, with songs. I don't do the interview thing. I try to funnel it through the prism that I built up inside myself over the years. Right. More than anything else. So I guess some of it comes from raising two boys myself, and from my own relationship with my father. We got on well, but there was a distance a lot of the times too. He was a seaman, and he would be home he would go off to sea for 6 months, and then he was home for 3 months. So it was like he either wasn't there or he was there totally all the time. And it was a little strange. We had a lot of different interests and everything, and we were different types of people. We still loved each other and everything, and we never really had an argument or a fight or anything, but I could feel the tension between us at times, And I think a lot of people, as they're listening or looking at this, would be saying to themselves, oh yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. It is, as you say, the father and son relationship is a deep one, and then what I tried to do too is to show, and the book didn't really come together right until I always had Jimmy. I knew Jimmy, and he's one of the best characters I've ever created, whether through songs or plays or novels. But I didn't know his wife, Maggie. It took me a long time to get to her. And I had her in early drafts of the book, which I'm glad never came out, as someone who continued to suffer during the book. Whereas in the final draft of it, I got to understand her more, that she had found a way through this. And it was through religion, not saying that everybody should be like her, but she had found a personal faith again, and this was getting her through it. And it was also going to have to get her through, could she reconcile with Jimmy? Because they'd come, there was such a gulf between them in the book. And she has to make a decision. Is she going to really fight to keep this man, or is she going to just let him go? And I think that was, the book changed at that moment.
Yeah, and I like the little interludes that you did with her, where she has this internal conversation and dialogue. You know, I like how you did that. I said, oh, this is cool, you know, like, because sometimes what authors do, and this isn't bad or good or whatever, but they write chapters from different people's perspectives in their voice.
Yeah.
And sometimes that can be confusing. I like that you didn't do that. I like that you still stayed in character, as it were, as a writer, that you kept it consistent through the book, that the reader has to do the work in the sense that, you know, you didn't like play it out. Like you really just kept it consistent. And as characters are sharing different, and you know, different you know, opinions and things about what's going on and what they're seeing, that internalization, you didn't italicize paragraphs, which I do all the time, but I liked it because it really engaged me, because I really wanted to know what each character was thinking without having to have it played out for me. The other thing I liked was, you know, the dialogue. It was clear that you know dialogue and understand it. And again, the authenticity comes into play again. This is how people talk, you know, especially people from Rockaway. You got all the inflections, you know, all the different things that people say. Often you'll read a book about, let's say I grew up in Brooklyn, right? And you'll read, you know, and it's like, wait a minute, nobody I grew up with ever spoke that way, you know? We didn't get smart till later. There was a lot of profanity, you know, it was like every other word. And I think that you found, like, the dialogue really moves the story, the way that they converse, all the different characters that come in, you know, the cast of characters that play a role. So where did you get that? And did it come from being a lyricist and writing songs? Is that how you got that knack for writing dialogue?
I really got it from playwriting, I would think, because in playwriting, there's no outside voice. The play moves by drama, and the drama usually is seen, most of the time anyway, through dialogue. So in a play, if there's one person at any point in the play that doesn't sound authentic, the play is over. Right. Because everyone will catch it and say, oh, come on, you know, and then you can't get back into it. With a play, right, your whole thing is you're casting a fantasy, and you've got to keep the person within the bubble of that fantasy all the time. So you learn, and also in a play then too, you learn it's not all about dialogue. It's about how do you cut out the dialogue. Right. Pete Seeger put that to me one time, and I thought he was kind of crazy at the time, but he said to me, it's not what you put in, it's what you take out that counts. And we were in a band, Pierce Turner, myself, we're called Turner and Kirwan of Wexford, and we played a lot of synthesizer and a lot of effects on everything. And Pete took this great liking to us, even though we were electric and everything. I think we were maybe the only electric band he ever liked. And we used to play with him, but he would I would be amazed when he'd come on the stage, and after this big barrage of sound that we had made, and we were young and we were very impressed with the sound we were making, he'd take it out his old banjo and he would go better than us. Like, right. He would floor us within 5 seconds. They'd forgotten all about us, and they were into that. And I used to study Pete and think, wow, how do you do that, man? How do you bring it back down to nothing and communicate? And I learned another thing from Jim Sheridan, the Irish director.
Yes, absolutely.
He used to work at the Irish Arts Center on 51st Street, and I used to bring plays in there and we'd read them. And he would always say to me, forget the politics, forget everything. It's humanity. You've got to deal with the humanity of the person. People are not interested in ideas. They're just interested in, can I recognize myself or someone else in this character of yours? That's what it's all about. And if you look at the work, it's all set around that. You know?
No, absolutely. I think that's what the great thing of, look, Jim Sheridan is fabulous. I love his work. And I definitely agree with it, you know, and you know, it's funny. I bring this up a lot. People are like, oh, you were an actor? Oh, I didn't know. You always bring it up, you know, because I miss it. But it did prepare me for this journalism career in the sense that you're right. People don't care about the politics, the ideas. They care about, and even more so with this pandemic, it's almost fitting in some ways that this book is going to be out when we're going to mark the 20th anniversary of 9/11. And it's going to be a powerful, I keep using that word, but I really don't have your gift for words. I think people will read this and they'll think about probably this book more than they would have in another year. I think it still would have had a great effect, but I think that being that it comes out in 2021 and with all of the ways that especially Rockaway is going to mark this passage of time, for many people, it's like it happened yesterday. And so I think that the fact that you did not really the characters really didn't let anyone know about how they felt about politics. It's about how they feel about the human condition from what happened that day. So, I mean, did that occur to you at all? Did that make the process pick up more, that you wanted it to be released in 2021?
No, not at all. In fact, it was supposed to be released in October, but my agent said no way. That 4 years before, she wasn't able to sell a book because nobody reads books during the presidential election. So she wouldn't let it. She said, you can put it out if you like, but nobody's going to buy it. So, because people don't buy books during the election. So you got to put it on to the next year. And, but you know, when you're writing a book, you get into the bubble of the book. I know I keep using that word of bubble, but and you're inside the book, and it's the same with a play. You're dealing totally with the characters, and I always say it's like they're rattling around in my head. You know, right. I can hear them, I feel them, and if you can't, I don't think you can write a book that moves people, you know, or a play. And when I'm doing interviews like this one, especially in the first month of the book coming out, I get revelations myself. It's like, now I remember why the initial reaction, why I came to write this book. And it happened in Connolly's the first week we went back there. You know, Black 47 was very lucky in that way. We traveled a lot, but Connolly's would keep whatever Saturdays open for us. Because, you know, it was one of those bands, you play, you get paid. That's the way it worked with Black 47. It was very much a working class kind of a feel about it. So we went straight back into Connolly's because we felt that the city needed some music and nobody was going to Uptown, nobody was going to Midtown. I remember walking across perpendicular across or diagonally, I mean, across Times Square the first month. Every night I would get off of 42nd Street subway to go to the gig, and I could walk in a diagonal right across because there's no cars, no people. And the first night the word got out with the first responders, Black 47 were playing. So the place was jammed. And, you know, we're all standing around before the gig. And the weird thing that I remembered afterwards was we didn't know at that point who was dead, who was alive. You know, it was just, that's the way it was. And so when you saw people you knew there, it was like, you know, that's great. And then Connolly's has a particular doorway, and when the door would open, everyone would turn around, and someone would come in and they would say, "John's alive, John," or "Mary, she got out alive," or something like that. And everybody would run over, and it was like this thing. And this went on and on, and we got up on stage. But even when we were playing, and Black 37 was a pretty arresting kind of loud band, I could see the same thing happen. People could sense that door open. Everyone would turn around. And that went on for at least a month, you know? And then around that time, I began to think, how about the people who didn't come through? You know, the people who came through deserve a book, and the people who didn't come through. And that was the impetus to write the book, was to tell their story. They weren't going to be in the newspapers or anything like that, you know. They were, Giuliani was taking all the limelight, you know, it was, but the regular people were getting forgotten about. They became ghosts or big shadows. And that's why I have that scene when Jimmy is driving down the West Side Highway with a woman, and him trying to come to terms with what this pit had become. You know, it's just, you know, couldn't they do something better with it? Put some better walls around it, you know, to keep the spirits in before they all dissipate. You know, so it was a kind of a spiritual thing, because I think New York changed after 9/11.
No question.
You know?
Right.
And I'm not the real religious type, but in the end, from doing this book and everything, I began to think that the spirits of those almost 3,000 people leaving New York, that changed the city. I mean, new people came in, and it became, New York will always go on. It's just that type of place. But there was a certain essence that left the city at that point. And that's why Black 47 did that album, New York Town. It was like, we wanted to tell the story of New York before the 9/11 and the New York after, to catch that kind of feeling. But after it was done, and I love the album and everything, and I don't listen to Black 47 albums, but occasionally I heard a song and I think, yeah, we nailed that. But I didn't think we'd captured what I really wanted to capture about telling the story of the regular people of New York. So that's why the book was always kind of back of my head, but it was a hard one to crack. I don't know, it was a tough book to write. I don't mean just because of the emotional content of it, but I felt I had to get it right.
Right.
And there were times I didn't get it right. It was like with Maggie, I felt really guilty because I knew I'd kind of got Rose, the daughter-in-law, right, but here's the mother who's taken the most pressure in this book, and I don't have her. You know, it was humbling, and it was like, I got to do better than this.
It's probably the fact that you are a playwright that it bothered you so much, you know, because, you know, when you write and you're just writing to tell a story, you don't always, not everyone worries about that. You know, is this character correct? You know, because a lot of times maybe they're based on real people, and you could always do research and figure it out. This is somebody from your own, you know, as you said, your own process, your own brain that you're trying to write and trying to capture. And that's the dedication of an artist. You know, it's like, I know this isn't right. I cannot do this until I get it right. So I definitely think that you did get it right in the end, because that character resonates as well. And I gotta say this. I said, if I don't ask him this or talk about this, I'm going to kick myself. I loved when the way that you talked about Bushmills and Jamesons, because, you know, I'm a Jameson guy. You know, Jameson rocks. That's what I drink. Okay, I don't drink Bushmills, but when I used to work, I used to work at Tavern on the Green.
Oh, yeah.
And there was a gentleman from Ireland who was a bartender that I got to be very friendly with. And we would talk, we would go out, we'd have a drink after work. And he said, have you ever had, he goes, what do you drink? Do you drink, what kind of Irish whiskey do you drink? And I said, Jameson. And he said, do you drink Bushmills? I'm like, I do not. I don't, never have, never will, And so he laughed. He said, I know why you don't drink it. He goes, but have you ever had Black Bushmills? Have you ever had the Black
I knew
Bush?
you were going to say Black Bush.
And so you wrote about it in the book. I'm like, there you go. All right. I was like, Jimmy's not going to drink. He's going to drink Bushmills? No, he's not going to drink Bushmills, is he? So I had to bring that up. So is that something that, obviously it's something that you've come across, that whole quandary of Jameson or Bushmills?
Yeah, well, I was very political and everything, but I didn't bring my politics to that level, I have to say, because I thought Black Bush tasted great.
I got over myself. I'm a sellout.
I was a Jameson drinker because as we traveled the country and everything, I began to realize that the Jameson is being used all the time. So it's not going to be that bottle that's up on the shelf that's been there forever,
Right.
It's, so on stage, about 2/3 of the way through the gig, I don't know if people notice this, but our road manager would bring me up a shot of whiskey. And I always thought it was great at that point because, with Black 47, it was all improv. It was, what song we doing next? I would have a list in front of me, but I would get away from that list within 4 or 5 songs. So it was what song is leading into another, it's just the way we worked. And around 2/3 of the way through the set, when I would have that shot of Bushmills or Jameson, it would turn my head around and it would go like that. Oh, I'm thinking in a slightly different way now, and it would give me that impetus for the rest of the gig. Right. So I was very aware of it because our various road managers, and they were great guys, the 2 or 3 of them that worked with us, had it worked out. They would usually give me Jamesons, but sometimes they think to themselves, let's try him with a Black Bush. See, can you tell the difference? And I always could. I always knew.
Cool. I mean, if you drink it, you definitely could. But I'm telling you, it's the only Bushmills I've ever had. I mean, it's just like
I never liked the other Bushmills that much. But
I just thought it was. When I read it, I was just, it made me chuckle, and I was like, I gotta talk about it during the interview.
Another thing to add to that was, it was as it goes along the story, Jimmy becomes closer to his dead son than he was at the beginning of it. There's an edge between them, and the fact that he would drink what the Black Bush, which he thought was kind of affected by Brian, that was an affectation. That he just did that in the Irish bars just to piss off the older Irish guys who were boycotting. But here he's saying, I want one. Yeah.
And you also interwove the whole Mets, Yankees, Piazza. You did that too, which I thought was great. Being a baseball guy and having written a baseball book, I loved that that the son was a Met fan because his dad was a Yankee fan, and then the other son was a Yankee fan with his. It was just great stuff. And then the grandson, he becomes a Mike Piazza fan. I mean, all that stuff was so, on its own wouldn't be interesting as much, but because it was part of this story, this story about this family, it all made sense, and none of it felt forced. It didn't feel like, oh, I guess he's got to talk about, this because these people are, baseball fans. So we got to throw something in there. Even those mentions of all that stuff, it really lent itself to the story on the whole.
Well, I actually thought that night up in Yankee Stadium was a really important night in New York history, because it was right before 9/11 and everything too, right? It was before
Right.
9/11? Yeah, of course. It
No,
was wrong.
right.
Yeah.
Well, the
I had a late
game.
night last
Well,
night.
there was two moments. There was the Piazza home run, which was the
Yeah.
first game back after
Right.
9/11.
Yeah, that was when I was
And
mixing.
right, and I'll never forget that. Howie Rose, who's the baseball broadcaster, I interviewed him about. I always said to him, I said to him, "Hey Howie, what was the greatest game that you ever broadcast?" And I just expected him to tell me, the '86 series or something along those lines. And he said it was that 9/11 game.
Yeah.
He said it was that 9/11 game and watching those firefighters and those first responders cheering after the worst day in their lives.
Yeah.
And that has always stayed with me.
Yeah.
And then you had later on where Bush throws out the first pitch at Yankee Stadium during the World Series. Those moments, 9 innings from ground zero, the great documentary. I got all of that when I'm reading this book, and I don't always do that. When people write about 9/11 and how it affected, the city or the families, not everybody can convey that feeling. I think you did that with this book. I really did. I think everybody should go out and get it because it's great stuff. Is there an audiobook? Did you do an audiobook for this?
Not yet. Yeah, I
Are
will
you
do one.
planning on it? You're doing one?
Yeah, at some point. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't because I tell you, this could be a play, this could be a movie. I mean, this could be.
Yeah, I'm considering both of them. I also thought it could make a great musical, just because you can do things in musicals. I mean, I'm not talking about the dancing girls type.
No,
of
I got you.
musical,
I get it.
but you can do things by using music in a musical that you can't do in a play, and you can't do in a book, and you can't really do in a movie either. So I've thought of that too. But one thing I just had to bring up about the book, because there's a subtext to it that I don't often mention, but seeing or getting into it in detail, I was looking at the book also right through the whole process of Jimmy Murphy telling the story of America from the time I arrived in the early to mid 70s right through till 2004 in the Iraq War. So basically, it's that stretch of time from the Vietnam War to the Iraq War. And Jimmy is a witness to it. He was in Vietnam. He never really speaks that much about it, although later on in the book, I had to explain why he was the way he was, and part of it was to do with Vietnam. And then, cops often get a real, they're looked at very generically. And I knew cops really well because of Black 47. My partner that formed a band with me was Chris Byrne, was a detective sergeant. And right from the start, we had a big cop and firefighter attendance, at all our gigs.
Yep.
And so I wanted to show that, a lot of cops didn't like the Iraq War, and yet you would think of them as being rah, rah and everything. And, because they understood this is not going to work. This is a stupid move to go into Iraq. And I wanted Jimmy, without really saying it, to be thinking, do they never learn? They sent us to Vietnam. We got blown out of there. They sent us to Iraq. And both of them were failures. It's something that I think it needs to be said in the country that, the rah-rah stuff, it just leads to more deaths and everything. And as Jimmy says at one point, the big people will do the sending and the stiffs will do the going, and that's an important thing that Jimmy sees that. He doesn't make a big point of it, but to me, I was aware of that, of Jimmy's thought process on America.
I think that, it's certainly something that is when you take away, everybody says, oh, they take away this, they take away that from a book. That resonated. That was huge. Reading that, how he explains it to maybe somebody that doesn't understand, and he tries to give this person perspective. And that goes back to your earlier point about sometimes people don't want to hear about perspective. They can only focus on the visceral, what's right in front of them, what's everybody else doing? How's everybody else reacting? And it really was, because I've seen those conversations happen. I've seen those reactions. I've seen those feelings come into play. Not everybody is on the speech and debate team,
No.
it's people aren't that scientific about their feelings and their passions, and I think that that's one of the lessons certainly from this book that I think people will get. Do you have any book signings planned? I mean, I know it's really tough to release a book during this time. Do you have any events planned around the book?
Not really at this point, because normally we are playing gigs and reading from the book at the same time, or doing readings. I do want to come out to Rockaway as soon as possible, though, and do a reading out on the peninsula itself. And with the vaccination moving along and everything, I think in the next month or two there'll be more opportunities to do readings. Mostly I'm doing readings by Zoom at this point. And one thing I did do, though, is, and I'll send you the link to it later, is because I wasn't able to get out and do this, what I did was kind of an evening of Rockaway Blue, and I did some readings from it, and I did 3 songs, 2 new ones about the book or inspired by the book.
Cool.
To to drive the action along and to get deeper into the characters, and one old Black 47 song, Fatima, to deal with the young Egyptian woman.
Yeah,
that was an important point. To have an Egyptian family there. So it's about 2 families, really. It's mostly about the Rockaway family, but also about the family that lives in Bay Ridge in Brooklyn, where I used to live at one point too. So.
No, and I think that both of those characters were very well written, and you didn't know, and that is the best part, I think, at the end of the day, when you can't predict the end, when you don't know exactly. It's like, what is this person talking about? That was such a great part, and that's why I couldn't put it down too, because I wanted to find out, at the end, what was Brian doing there? What was Youssef, and what was the relationship he had with Brian? What was the relationship with Fatima? So look, I can't recommend this book enough. Thank you so much for your time.
It's a pleasure, Mark. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to watching the Rockaway Blue link that you're going to send me. I'm going to share it with our readers.
Yeah.
And look, please look me up when you come to Rockaway, and
I'll meet you in Rogers on a Tuesday afternoon.
That's right. Well,
that's the hooky from work.
You won't have to beg me to go to Rogers, and I want to get this signed. I want to get a signed copy.
Definitely.
So, best of luck with the book. Best of luck with everything moving forward, and thank you so much for joining me today.
It's a pleasure, and hope everything is well in Rockaway. It's one of my favorite parts of the world. Take care.